The ritual was always the same. Every morning at 7, the sound of the plastic lid clicking open was the first real sound of the day. Maya always trusted the ritual. Elena was there, a silent observer in the kitchen's half-light, watching Maya through the steam of her coffee. They had shared everything since childhood, or so Maya believed. Trust isn't a decision you make every day. It's the absence of suspicion. It's the water you drink without checking the source. "You've been looking pale lately," Elena said softly, her voice like silk over gravel. She pushed a white capsule across the dark granite. "It's just a supplement Mom bought." Maya looked at her sister. In Elena's eyes, there was only the practiced calm of a medical student who knew exactly how to soothe. She swallowed it. The house was quiet, holding its breath. But as Maya turned to the sink, the light from the window didn't just brighten, it began to scream. Then the floor began to tilt. The floor didn't just tilt, it vanished. Maya felt her heart skip, then race, a panicked bird trapped in her ribs. The sound of the glass shattering was the last clear thing she heard before the static set in. Elena didn't scream. She didn't call for help. She just stood there, looking down with a curious, analytical gaze as Maya's lungs refused to pull in the air. Maya saw Elena check her watch. It wasn't the panic of an accident. It was the timing of an experiment. Maya's hand clawed at the tile, her fingernails leaving faint streaks before her strength failed. Elena leaned down, her shadow falling over Maya's face like a shroud. "It's just a joke, Maya," she whispered. "Try not to be so dramatic." Then, the darkness finally won, pulling Maya into a silent, cold vacuum. At the hospital, the doctors spoke of accidental overdose. "Wait until you see what the blood work actually says. Isolation isn't being alone, it's being surrounded by people who refuse to see you." Maya lay in the bed, the hum of the machines the only honest thing in the room. Her parents, David and Susan, sat in the plastic chairs, their faces etched with a fear that wasn't for Maya's life, but for the family's reputation. Elena had been so brave, they said, confessing her little prank to them in private. They begged Maya not to tell the police, not to ruin Elena's medical career before it even began. "She's your sister," David whispered, his hand trembling on the railing. She didn't mean it. The incentive was clear. Save the golden child, sacrifice the victim's reality. Maya watched them, realizing her survival was an inconvenience to their narrative. They brought flowers that smelled like funerals and spoke in hushed tones about moving forward. The walls of the hospital felt like a sanitized prison. "I hope you're ready for the truth." The distortion began immediately. While Maya was still hooked to an IV, Elena was already curating the narrative. On social media, she became the tragic hero, the sister who had made a silly mistake and was now suffering the mental toll of guilt. The world showered her with sympathy. In the family living room, the atmosphere was one of forced normalcy, a performance where the script was written by Susan and David. They spoke of Maya's clumsiness to the neighbors, reframing the lethal overdose as a fainting spell. The truth was being overwritten by a more convenient fiction. Maya watched the lies bloom on her phone, realizing that her own family was erasing her experience to protect the machine of their social standing. Every public smile from Elena was a private slap to Maya's face. Even the air in the house felt curated, filtered through the need to maintain an image. The narrative was set, and Maya was the only one who didn't have a speaking part. The document on the table was only the beginning. Manipulation is a slow drip. It started with David handing her a document, a waiver phrased as an insurance formality. It was a request to sign away her right to pursue legal action in exchange for a restoration of family peace. Maya looked at the pen, then at the man who had taught her to ride a bike. He couldn't look her in the eye. They offered her things, a new apartment, a vacation, as if her life had a price tag. Susan would come into her room at night, crying about Elena's future. They were weaponizing Maya's love against her, making her the villain if she chose to seek justice. If she didn't sign, the family would go bankrupt from legal fees. They were dismantling her resistance one guilt trip at a time. The pressure was a physical weight, a suffocating blanket. Maya realized they weren't protecting Elena. They were protecting the version of themselves they needed to believe in. But the pen stayed on the table. A call from the insurance investigator was ignored, but the message remained. The betrayal was confirmed in the quiet of the tool shed. Maya had been looking for a reason to believe it was truly a prank. But hidden behind a row of rusted garden shears, she found the original bottle. It wasn't a supplement. It was their grandmother's digitalis, stolen months ago. It wasn't a random swap. It was a calculated dosage. Elena hadn't been playing a joke. She had been performing a clinical trial on her own sister. The realization was a cold, sharp blade. The distraught sister in the hospital was a character Elena had played to perfection. The parents' pleas weren't based on ignorance, but on a desperate need to hide the monster they had raised. The entire family structure was built on a lie so deep that the truth felt like treason. Maya sat in the dark shed, realizing she was entirely alone in a house of predators. The prank was finally over, and the real work was about to begin. Every memory now had a darker meaning. The evidence was small, but it was absolute. Hidden damage is the silent cost of a betrayal. Maya's recovery wasn't a straight line. Her heart, scarred by the digitalis, struggled with the simplest tasks. A flight of stairs felt like a mountain. The doctor's office was a room of grave faces and quiet explanations of permanent arrhythmia. This was the price of Elena's joke. The sister was moving on to a brilliant career, while Maya was left with a body that could no longer keep up. The parents saw the physical toll and chose to look away, as if by ignoring the limp, they could ignore the crime. Every heartbeat was a reminder of what they had allowed. Maya spent her days in a state of controlled exhaustion, watching her life narrow into a series of appointments. The family continued to celebrate Elena's achievements, throwing parties that Maya could no longer attend. The hidden damage was a constant, rhythmic pulse of resentment, a heartbeat that sounded like a countdown. The foundations were beginning to crack. Maya was the only one who felt the vibration. It was a realization that changes everything. Revenge setup is a masterpiece of patience. Maya didn't scream. Instead, she met a man in a rainy parking lot, someone who dealt in digital footprints. Together, they traced the purchase of the supplements to a dark web vendor Elena had accessed from the campus library. The evidence was being compiled into a ledger of facts that could not be reframed. Maya began to volunteer for the committee of Elena's graduation gala, the event where the city's medical elite would gather. She was the quiet daughter, taking care of the invitations and the digital displays. She was invisible, a ghost in the machine of the family's social climb. Every night she refined the plan, ensuring that every incentive her parents had to protect Elena would become a weakness she could exploit. She wasn't just planning a reveal, she was planning a systemic collapse. Maya's hands were steady now, even as her heart skipped beats. The gala invitations went out, each one a thread in the web she was weaving. The setup was complete, a document not yet opened. The house was finally waiting for the first note of the symphony. False resolution is the calm before the impact. The night of the graduation gala arrived, a sea of black ties and silk dresses. The ballroom was filled with the elite, the very people Elena had spent years grooming. David and Susan were radiant, basking in the reflected glory of their golden child. To everyone in the room, the incident with Maya was a distant, forgotten memory. Elena stood at the center of admirers, her career at a top clinic already secured. Even Maya seemed to have finally moved on, standing quietly by the digital display she had prepared. They toasted to the future and to the strength of family. The music was soft, and the lies felt like the most comfortable thing in the world. Elena leaned over and squeezed Maya's hand. "I'm glad you're finally seeing things our way," she whispered. The family was a united front, a pristine image of success. The gala moved toward its climax, the keynote speech that would officially welcome the new doctors. Maya was the one holding the remote. The call was coming from inside the house. The reversal was instant. As the keynote speaker praised Elena's dedication to life, the slideshow behind him changed. It wasn't a photo of graduation. It was a high-resolution scan of the toxicology report from Maya's hospital stay. Beside it, the digital footprints of the dark web purchase, linked to Elena's campus account. The room went silent. The words, "lethal dosage," flashed in jagged white across the screen. Maya let the data speak. She showed the board of directors exactly what kind of doctor they were about to license. The elite medical board members leaned forward in horror. Elena's face went from triumph to a mask of terror in a single heartbeat. David and Susan watched as the narrative they had built was dismantled in seconds. A hidden truth had changed everything. The news was already breaking on every phone in the room. The medical student poisoner was no longer a secret. Elena turned to Maya, her eyes wide with a realization that came too late. The system that protected her was now the one that would destroy her. The toast was still in the air, a line that gains new meaning after today. Revenge execution is the landing of a calculated blow. The ballroom was cleared by the authorities. Elena was led out in her graduation gown, her pristine white sneakers clicking against the marble floor for the last time. The handcuffs were a silver finality. The medical board revoked her credentials before she even reached the police car. The revenge was inevitable in hindsight, exploiting Elena's belief that Maya's heart was as weak as her silence. The payoff was hers, and it was heavier than she ever imagined. Elena didn't cry. She just stared at Maya with that same analytical gaze she had used in the kitchen. The parents stood alone in the empty ballroom, their standing in the community gone. Their pride was collateral damage in the war they had chosen to ignore. The revenge wasn't just about Elena. It was about the system that had enabled her. Maya watched from the shadows, her resolve absolute. The audience was forced to question whether justice or harm was done. It didn't feel like victory. It only felt like consequence. The damage was spreading, a silent reaction with unclear meaning. The aftershock left the house hollow. Maya sat in the empty kitchen, the marble counter cold beneath her hands. The victory didn't feel like justice. It just felt like the end. The family was gone, replaced by a ledger of costs. The system absorbed the damage, issuing a sterile statement while Elena's future evaporated. Maya opened a new bottle of water, the seal breaking with a sharp, final click. She was the only one left to drink it. The silence was finally absolute. Maya realized she hadn't blinked in a very long time. Her reflection in the dark window was the only ghost left in the house. The story ended where it began, with a glass of water and a sister's smile that was permanently gone. The debt was paid, but the house would never be warm again. Maya turned off the light, leaving the kitchen to the shadows and the ticking of the clock. Some jokes are never meant to be finished. The end was just a new kind of normalcy. Maya closed her eyes, but the light stayed white. Truth is the only prank that never ends. The debt was paid, but the cost was everything. The house was finally, perfectly silent. The end.